And welcome to Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman, your host and purveyor here at Whiskey Politics. You can find us on YouTube, on Apple Podcast, on Ricochet, and all of your favorite podcast applications. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and also give us a good rating if you're enjoying the show, and a review over at Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast application, including Google Play and Stitcher. And you can also find us over at ricochet.com, where the conversation is just incredible. There are so many smart people over there, so many great writers, and a lot of other content as well. Also want to take a moment and thank individuals who have been donating to Whiskey Politics. You can see our PayPal account below here in the bar. Thank you so much for helping us keep the lights on. Greatly appreciate it. And any little bit helps. So if you haven't done so and you're thinking about it, just type in that paypal.me/mywhiskeypolitics, and that really does help us out. We've got some announcements coming up in the next couple of weeks regarding some other platforms that we're just now starting with, and I'm excited about that as well. And today's guest, I'm also very excited about having on Brian Kilmeade. You know Brian from Fox News. He co-hosts Fox morning show Fox and Friends, and that is the #1 morning show, by the way, on cable news. And he also hosts the Fox News radio program, The Brian Kilmeade Show. A lot of work this guy puts in every single day, and just when you think that he's all over TV and he's doing things, he's also an author, a 6-time author. I mean, I don't know about you. It's hard to write my first book. I'm still trying. To write 6 books and to do the investigatory, it isn't just opinion, on history and what actually took place takes a tremendous amount of time. So I'm going to be asking Brian a lot of different questions about a lot of different issues today. Specifically, I really want to get his opinion on the state of the media. He obviously is at Fox News, and a lot of people are worried that Fox News is kind of pivoting itself a little bit more to maybe center or center left. But at least a lot of conservatives have been saying that as well. I want to get his opinion on that, what he's seeing behind the scenes over there at Fox News as well. And the state of heroes in our country today. You know, this book, Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers, is a fantastic read, and it really is a page turner. You don't feel like you're reading history. You feel like you're reading a Western action adventure as you're reading it. It's written in that way. You'll put it away in a few days. It's that good. But I really want to get his impressions on, obviously, the book itself, but how it relates to today and how we are learning about history, and whether kids have an appreciation for history, or are they going in a different direction whereby they are apologizing for America and its blunders over the years. So I hope you enjoy the interview of Brian Kilmeade. Let us know what you think in the comment section of whatever platform it is that you're watching this. And go check out his new paperback that just came out this week. It's got an addendum, which is not in my hardcover. We're going to talk about that during the interview here with Brian Kilmeade. Thanks for joining us here at Whiskey Politics. On weekdays, you can find Brian Kilmeade co-hosting Fox's morning show, Fox and Friends, which is the #1 morning show on cable news. And he hosts the Fox News radio program, The Brian Kilmeade Show, and his 6 books, 6 folks, incredible book, Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers, The Texas Victory That Changed American History, which is now out in paperback. Brian, you know what? I got to just say this, and I this is what I love about this book. And it reads like a fast-paced action adventure, and yet I have to keep reminding myself that this really happened. I'm actually getting smarter by reading your book. Congratulations, man! This is incredible.
Well, where'd you grow up, David?
London, England.
Okay, that'll do it. How long you been here?
Most of my life, 40+ years.
Okay. I grew up in New York, and I found that most people, if they didn't live in Texas or born in Texas, they just said, well, that's somebody else's history. It's interesting. We got one day in school at the Alamo, and that's it. I understand in England, they just spend almost no time in the American Revolution. So I guess every country and every state has their own priorities. Is that correct?
I can't imagine why we didn't get so much of the American Revolution in England.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
But I mean, it ended up, you know, you would think that going back with how we became great allies, how we were first great friends and then enemies. But I was just fascinated by that. So after doing Thomas Jefferson, the Tripoli Pirates, I wanted to go, what's next? Well, the War of 1812, totally underappreciated in our history because it was a draw. And everyone's like, well, you know, that big battle that we won, what's the big deal? The war was technically over by then. But then I was with the 3rd Infantry, 2nd Division in Kuwait before the invasion of Iraq, and they kept talking about the cotton ballers, and it dates back to New Orleans. And that would always stick in my mind, and I would say, yeah, I think I know what you mean. What are you talking about? Cotton ballers, okay. Then it turns out they, what they put together as a fortress to stop the British, the best standing army in the history of the world, and beat them in 45 minutes. I said, wow, let me focus on just that, because John Meacham and all those great historians would do a much more comprehensive, thorough job on the history of the war. What if I just grab an element of it?
Yeah,
and after doing Andrew Jackson, I saw this one guy kept on bleeding through it, and it was Sam Houston. And I said, if I'm going to go up in time, why go to the Mexican War, which no one understands? Why not go to the Texas Revolution? And then when I realized they were all Americans fighting in it, and there was really an American war, I said, I got to sell the other 49 states on the significance of the war. And most people said, I never knew why Houston, the city of Houston, was named after Sam Houston. I know Sam Houston, but I never knew what he did.
This guy was a stud. I mean, I'm reading this thing and I'm thinking to myself, I wouldn't have gone over that wall, first of all, but he continued forward with arrows in his leg and shrapnel in his and bullets in his shoulder. I want to get to all of that because it's so just compelling. And it, like I said, it's riveting. First of all, let me ask you this. You're in New York City. You work, the biggest cable news operation in the United States. Tell us how you guys are doing right there. I know you live in Long Island, but you're in the hardest hit region in the world. How are you guys doing?
It sucks. I mean, we don't go into Manhattan now. I have if you're familiar with Long Island, I'm in Nassau County, we're on the Nassau border. They have a small satellite studio there. So there's no delay between us, but you can imagine if there was a 1.5-second delay between us.
Yeah.
We'd have to wait. I have to make sure there's a beat before you finish. So hosting with 2 other anchors, one who's a 1/2 second off, the other's a 1.5 seconds. I'm about a second off. It takes the spontaneity out of the show. So that's, I'm luckier than 99% of the people, but in terms of actually doing the TV show, it's about 1/3 as good as it could be. Number 2 is doing the radio show right after is great, but just to sit in one area for 6 hours with no in-studio guests is strange, but still we're getting used to it. In terms of New York, there's nothing you could do besides Costco, nothing you could do besides pharmacy, nothing you could do besides liquor stores.
Yeah. And
I'm just watching all these stores just die in the vine for me for no reason. I mean, we get it. We know the rules. We understand what has to go into it. If you want to be irresponsible, the same people that walk across traffic without looking, the same people that don't signal on the road are the same people that are going to be not taking this serious. That's going to be the deal anyway. So get the dry cleaners open. I want to be able to play tennis, not just golf. You got to be able to play tennis again. And when it comes to youth sports, figure out a way to get it going, whether it's temperature checks on the head, whether it's taking coaches with underlying conditions and saying, got to turn it over to the assistant coach. You got to find a way to live with this while leaving the scientists and doctors to deal with this, in my mind.
You know, Brian, you have a really fascinating story yourself, and I didn't know this about you, but, looking up for this interview, you used to be just an incredible soccer player. In fact, you wanted to be a professional soccer player before you went into, comedy and then radio and TV. I understand that you filled in for former anchor Tony Snow, and that was kind of your entree into Fox News. But tell us a little bit about your journey to ending up on, again, the biggest morning show on cable news television.
Well, for one thing, I have to correct you on one thing. I wanted to be great, but I wasn't. I mean, I played from 5 to 22, 300 days a year, every team possible, trained like crazy, and was just an average Division II player. And, I played at CW Post, a 500 team where I was an average player, stand out for a couple of years, according to one coach, not good enough to start, according to the coach that replaced him. But all that is part of, I think, that helped me with this business, because when people start giving you rejection letters, when people start saying, yeah, I saw you, you're not that good, I thought to myself, okay, I've been through this before, as opposed to the star who's used to getting the ball in crunch time and taking the penalty kicks, or the guy who everyone goes to with no time left on the clock in basketball. I was never the guy, but I wanted to be the guy. So I thought if I took the same work ethic with something maybe I'm better at, which I was an average athlete, but maybe I potentially could be better at TV and radio, on camera, on stage. If I took that same work ethic, maybe I'd get better results. And I certainly was hardened when the rejection started flowing in. I mean, I do some things for Fox Nation where I go through all my books, and I also talk about my story. which I never wanted to do, because if you're not Michael Jordan, why tell your story? If you're not Kobe Bryant, why are you important? And I found out that most people try to be great at things. And if they don't, they think it doesn't matter. And it's not true. It's how you decide to learn from those moments and what you can take from it, and how it changes you, or how you choose to change decides who you'll be. So I kept those rejection letters. And in fact, when I go on stage, I show them, I laid them all out on my kitchen floor. I have probably close to 500 on TV, radio, stage. Yeah, you're not the right person, to form letters, to specifically to encouraging letters, but you're not going to get the job. Kept them all. But all those times in which I was on the bench in soccer, yet training like a madman, but cared so much, that guy, when those rejection letters rolled in, it was just like the coach looking at the bench and going with somebody else. But only this time, I'm not going to run out of eligibility. No coach is going to decide whether I can play or not. I'm going to go to the next team. And that's why I thought it was an important lesson that I'd like to relate to people, because more people go through what I went through in soccer than go through what Michael Jordan goes through in basketball. And they wonder, did I waste my time? I mean, there's no fans in the stands. I'm not getting a full scholarship. Yeah. There's not a lot of glory in it. Am I wasting my time in volleyball and empty gyms and Division III football? And the answer is no. You go at everything as hard as you can. It's not about the praise or applause. It's what you take from it. And then when the time is right, you hopefully can use all those things and be there at the moment. And if you look at, and if I could just go to Sam Houston, this guy drank too much. He got kicked out of the state house as governor of Tennessee. He also beat another lawmaker with his cane, senseless. He blew a bunch of jobs. As a kid, he was lazy, but he kept getting better and better and better and learning from it. And at 40 years old, he was the perfect person at the perfect time to lead this band of Texian soldiers to victory against a standing army. I'm not Sam Houston, but in a small way, it's all of our stories.
Brian, we're both fathers, and I think that you talk about Michael Jordan, or you look at a Kobe Bryant, whoever it may be, that has just incredible amounts of talent. What if you are a B+ in the talent department? How do you break through when there are so many A's that are out there? And secondly, what is the lesson that we could pass on to our kids for them to understand the tenacity that is necessary to achieve those goals?
Well, I mean, let them fail, number one. Hard as it is, don't go up to the coach and demand they start. Sometimes just failure is the best lesson, because number one, it teaches you compassion, because when other people go through it, you can look at them and say, yeah, I've been through it and I survived it. Number two is keep them in the game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And the other thing, there are times in life, for example, if you gave me your taxes, you're going to be very disappointed. I'll give my 100%, but I am so bad at math and science. But if you gave me your English or social studies homework and you want me to explain it to you, I'm pretty good at it. Yeah. But I think the key is approaching both things the same way, and understand your strengths and liabilities. Sometimes on certain teams, I give you an example. Let's keep it with basketball. I watched Charles Oakley, Division II, Virginia Union. He couldn't be stopped. Yeah, you're familiar with him. He was just a blue-collar player who everybody wanted as a teammate. Now, in the pros, he averaged 8 to 10 points. In college, he averaged probably between 30 and 40. I watched him take my school apart. I did play-by-play. I was like, this guy's unstoppable. But yet when he went to the pros, he was not an offensive threat. Wherever you go, there's somebody who's going to be above you. You're going to be a star in college. You're going to go to the pros. You're going to have to work your way up, unless you're that rare, unique talent. But it's those experiences and those journeys along the way. For example, Michael Jordan, just using that one, Steve Kerr plays a key role. John Paxson plays a key role. Now, John Paxson's in the front office of the Bulls. He knows what it's like to be great. He knows what it's like to be great in college, but just good on his pro team. Steve Kerr was a role player with the Bulls, but might be one of the best coaches in the league. Mm-hmm. So his glory was in college, and he got his championships, but he wasn't a Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman player. But man, I would say that he might be indispensable with the Golden State Warriors because of what he went through with those stars. He knows the star code. He knows how to treat them, and he knows the importance of role players. Mm-hmm. So it's everything that you take along the way. Make it a learning experience instead of a thumbs up, thumbs down. I won, I lost. How about this is the result? What am I going to learn from it? Mm-hmm. And the only way to do that is start experiencing rejection. For example, these kids coming out of college now, They're coming out. They thought they had a 2.8% unemployment. The world was there. The opportunities were plentiful. That all changed. We're at 16% unemployment, and people are being furloughed and fired. Okay, let's time for plan B. Not going to take it personal. I'm going to be resilient. I'm going to be resourceful. I'm going to read everything possible to let me understand where the market's going, where the job market's going, where the first states to turn around. Do I have a set of skills that are going to be able to help Amazon and CVS, the companies that are doing well? So that resiliency, I think, is born by your ability to process challenges. Instead of I failed, oh, how do I deal with this? Instead of I'm terrible or I'm great, how do I deal with my reality right now? Instead of blaming, taking charge and taking responsibility.
Well, you retreat and pivot and attack a different way, and that's what you talk about in your book here. Let me ask you about this, because before, obviously, COVID-19, you were on a book tour. This book came out originally, at the end of December, January? And you were meeting with people all over the country on this. And I know the paperback has just come out this week with, I think, and we could talk about this, some addendums to it, which is something that I'd love to hear about. But when you speak with people all across the country in person, when you were doing it, what did you hear from people when they came to hear you speak? What were their concerns? What did they want to tell you?
A couple of things. Number one, why aren't kids taught this in school? Number one. Number two is I never knew that. And you're talking about people with, MBAs.
Yeah.
Never knew that, which is fine.
Yeah.
Which is great, actually. And number three is in Texas, everyone seems to be related to somebody in this story. And they have such pride in it. And instead of them being, this is my story, how dare you, as a New Yorker, even though Texas seems to love Fox, where 2/3 of it does, they seem to really like the show and be open to it. But they love the fact that their story is being spread far and wide. I thought, when I feared before I took the project on, is that they feel the opposite. It's our story. We got this handled. How dare you come in here in 2 years, research, record, interview. I actually did 2 specials on it for Fox Nation too. And then roll this out. Instead, they were just the opposite. How can I help you? How's it going? And what I did is, instead of them being critics, I mailed my manuscript out to the people that helped me most. I said, what problems do you have with this? And then they say, I would expand this part. I'm like, listen, if I expand this part, I got another 500 or 700 page book that no one's going to read. I need 200 to 300, totally accurate. And then other times that would be wrong. And they'd go, Brian, didn't happen this way. This guy got shot. Okay, boom, where'd you get that from? Went back to my source. I fixed it. So I felt I made my critics my teammates. So that helped. And, I give them some money. I'd say, do me a favor. Here's some money. Just check this out. Can you take a week? Because the thing I wanted most was accuracy. There's things that have to be opinion. There was no tape recorders, and there were no survivors. You had Dickinson, who was Susanna Dickinson, who was there and recorded it, but her story seemed to change. So there'd be a lot of elements like George Washington's Secret Six, where there were verbal stories, nothing written. And then you can make your own decisions. So those are the 2 things. Number one, thanks for telling my story instead of how dare you. Number 2, I never knew that. Number 3, why don't they learn this in schools?
You're talking about teaching things in schools. Is there an appreciation for history today? I mean, for example, are our youth aware of America's successes and setbacks? Or, when we go on cable news or we see, things on the internet, especially from a political perspective, it seems like there is a huge number of kids today that want to apologize to the world for America's blunders and mistakes over the years. How do you see that from your perspective?
You're 100% right. I get it. That is your point, and it is correct. It is rare when a kid is patriotic. You don't want a young man or woman buying into propaganda. America's perfect. We're the best. Oh, yeah, well, that slavery thing. Well, we got over it. Everyone has slavery. Yeah, it's all true. Don't whitewash the bad parts, because it makes your compliments of the country diminished. I mean, I think that we have saved the world in so many respects between the example we set and our willingness to get better and be our own greatest critic. But for goodness sakes, the patriotism has just gone out the window. It is so in vogue to criticize America. That 1619 project, I started to read it and I got sick of it.
She got a Pulitzer.
Unbelievable. The more negative things you can say about the country, the better. Yeah. And listen, I'm also, my next project is the the working title is The President and the Freedom Fighter, How This Unlikely Friendship Fought and Won a War and Made America a More Perfect Union, the story of Frederick Douglass and Lincoln. And I'm reading Frederick
Wow.
Douglass's autobiographies.
Oh,
And
that's going to be fantastic.
I hope so. And,
Yeah.
But you understand the anger the African community has. You know, your parents were from England, right?
Yep.
Okay. Mine were from Ireland and Italy, 1901, 1920, coming over here. We had nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no racist talk in any dinner table, my extended family, period. But when they talk about their pen, they talk about Ireland and why they came here and Italy and what brought them here. But when they sit around the table, when African-American families can go back to slavery and they talk about the brutality of Reconstruction, you know, there's no good in festering on it, but there's also no good in ignoring it. And the thing is, we're addressing it. We make it better. When things like Georgia happen with that shooting, it brings back memories.
Yeah.
You do not just say, well, that was then. Make it part of our story, but also part of our story. We fought a war to fix it. We are doing everything we can to make sure we get better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And around the world, it is still a part of almost every culture.
Well,
and we want to get better on it, but I still think there should be fundamental patriotism, and I think it's got to be in our school system, not brainwashing. Patriotism.
And I'll be interested to see if you put this in your book, upcoming book here, but you know, we're all victims, right? I mean, my grandfather fought in World War II, was shot down, RAF, shot down over Nazi-occupied France, was a prisoner of war of a German camp in France for 4 years. My father was beaten up every day because of anti-Semitism. Your parents and grandparents, dealt with the immigration issues of the Irish, moving to the United States. We know what happened there. Every demographic has taken incoming over the centuries. The question is, do we teach our children to understand that and appreciate that and say never again, or do we teach them to become victims?
Perfectly said. And that's why my book tour for that in a year and a half is going to be so intriguing. And people are encouraging me. The first thing I did is call Jim Brown, the guy I hosted a show with for 4 years. We're still friends. And before I'm finished, he said to me, I'm so proud of you for taking this on. Instead of how dare you, I'm so proud of you taking this on. He goes, let me know. I want to be on the back of the book. I go, do you want to read it along the way? He goes, no. So, and
Wow.
I'm not so much worried about the critics, because I'm not going to come off as a racial expert. I'm not going to come off as a expert on that area. I'm going to try to digest the past of both men when their paths crossed and how much better our country is because they did.
Yeah. Brian, it's really interesting because a lot of news anchors get their reputation for being teleprompter readers. And I did live news 2 hours every day with America's Voice News for some time. And there's a difference between what we see when we turn on our local news and the people that are just reading this, the stupidity, and having a dialogue and an understanding and a comprehension of facts. And you have to know a lot of facts about a lot of different issues all the time. You got to be on your game. And one of the things that, again, this is your 6th book and you're writing about history. It has to be right there. You're obviously very much interested in history. How did that happen for you? Coming from sports and radio and TV, where did your interest come from for this? And do we see that in other? I don't want you to sell your colleagues down the pike here, but is that level of intelligence ubiquitous in news today, or not?
Well, I would say this. We have great producers, but the actors got to know their stuff, because when you're out there, because we're in the 24-hour news cycle, if Laura Ingraham wants me to fill in on her show, yeah. I can't rely on, there's nothing written except the opens and the teases. So, and they'll write me some bullet points and they'll say POV, and most of the time the POV is so generic. Mm-hmm. So I got to know the issue. So I find myself studying the issues so much. And then you go to like the foreign policy magazines to get positions. And I don't steal, but I want to widen. This is how I feel, and I don't want to be open to. I want to be able to back up my opinions. So I find that people do work hard, but there are certain areas there's a passion with. For example, I don't think everybody knows everything about everything. There are certain people, when the hurricanes hit, like Shepard Smith and Steve Ducey, they love it. They're looking at to me. I feel bad for the people. I got hit by a flood. I got all my stuff burned in a fire, so I can relate to the whole thing. It helps me with the story. But it's just the devastation. I just said to myself, as bad as it is, we've been through this so many times before. The economic collapse, I'm not an economist, but man, was I willing to learn what happened in 2008. So I would be asking myself more questions. I learned enough to know it. When you want to get a perspective on the war on terror, that led me to Thomas Jefferson's Tripoli Pirates, because people would say, if you want to know where this angst started for America, it was with Jefferson. So that gave me a depth and a perspective, and all the way up to Libya and Reagan on Islamic extremists. But I find that very few people are sitting on that couch or in our anchors with Fox. I don't know the other channels. They really aren't into it, because this never, David, doesn't stop.
Yeah.
The storyline's continuing. People like The Housewives or The Bachelor, because it's a storyline. We're rolling with 6 huge storylines: the pandemic, the presidential election, the Russia unmasking of what's happening right now, the economic strife that we're witnessing now, the heroism. So you got 6 storylines you got to follow. If you don't really know it, the prompter is not going to help you, and the producer is not going to help you. You will be exposed.
Agreed. We've got Brian Kilmeade. Brian, he co-hosts Fox's morning show, Fox and Friends, and he also hosts the Fox News radio show and the program Brian Kilmeade Show. He's 6 books, Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers, the Texas Victory that changed American history. One last question about the news, Brian, before we get deep into this, because this is such a compelling, incredible book. And I'm not just saying it because you're on the show. I really, really enjoyed this book. But I got to ask you one question. A lot of our viewers, they watch Fox News. They love Fox News. I've been watching Fox News since the mid-90s, since it became a thing. A lot of people on the right are suggesting that they don't have a home in mainstream media today, because the mainstream media definitely tilts to the left. A lot of reality, maybe that's perception, that's arguable. I agree with that perception. Some people have been saying, and I know that I have to ask this question carefully, that Fox News has been changing under Lachlan and James Murdoch over the past couple of years, maybe moving more to the center, maybe left of center on certain issues as well. Do you hear those complaints, and how would you respond to that?
Oh yeah, I hear it. But it's like a couple of things. James is a great guy, but James is no longer involved.
Okay.
Lachlan is a fantastic guy. I've had more interaction with him than I had with Roger Ailes in 20 years. And I've never seen a guy who cares more about just how you're doing at the highest level than Lachlan. And I knew him when he first came in. The best thing he did about the place, he came in when in the late 90s or early 2000s, and he put a gym in the building, because that was the best thing. So I could actually work out and stay. And then he came back, and he really understands what's going on. And then Suzanne, who's been there from day one. And then Jay Wallace, who started as a PA. So those are the top 3. I will say we know we're under additional scrutiny more than ever before. So we're going to say something extreme either way. We got to be ready to back it up. But I think Tucker, Sean, Martha, Laura, Brett, they will tell you they're calling their own shots. And if there's an issue, they let us know. But I've never felt more autonomy than I do right now. And I wouldn't say that's the case at all. I will say that there is such hatred for Trump. The praise that Fox gets anytime they take him on makes everybody say, wow, they're moving to the left. No, we're calling balls and strikes. And if you didn't like the economy, if you didn't like the deficit with Trump's economy, you're right. No one's on our channel is going to defend the deficit. But if you didn't like our economy, you're not giving him a fair shot. If you didn't like his attitude on trade, he shouldn't have been elected. So the things that people didn't like Trump, and if anyone on our channel takes on Trump, they go, well, Fox is changing. I think it makes us a place where you can get multiple opinions. You don't want to put on a channel that's only, to me, that's only going to echo what you think. We got to test. We got to test people. We got to test issues. When you get a guy in the right come on, and you don't ask him real questions, if you don't ask Kelly Stauffer about our insider trading, but only ask Senator Feinstein, who will come on our channel about insider trading, you're not doing the audience a good job. I don't think so. I mean, the guy that was the most talented broadcaster I've ever seen, Shepard Smith, left. That was the one I had there were a lot of critics on. The weekend programming, they're doing their own thing. Nobody thinks that Mark Levin is to the left. Nobody thinks that Sean Hannity's to the left. Nobody thinks that Laura Ingram's to the left. Martha is fair, in my opinion, just as a viewer, is right up the middle to the right, but that's what she's supposed to be, isn't she?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I thought Megyn Kelly had the perfect balance because she'd be just as hard as the right as on the left, and she would really test you. But if you had your answers, you'd look great.
Well, your
So,
ratings are through the roof. You guys are killing it, and I
yeah.
think a lot of people, even we got friends on the left that watch Fox News because they know what they're going to be getting from the other two main cable competitors of yours. It seems to be just Trump derangement 24/7, and I think a lot of people get sick of that outside of the far fringes. But keep doing what you're doing, and again, the numbers are doing great. Let's talk about the book. I just lost one of my friends to Texas. I've been friends with him since I was 15 years old. He just moved to Dallas, as so many people in California have been doing over the past several years. Why were people, we understand why people are doing that today from states like New York and California. Why were people moving to Texas in the 1830s?
Believe it or not, people were sensing they wanted a new start after a new start. They'd come to America and they were complaining that, prices are too high. This political culture is too great. I want additional freedom. Do you believe that? It was true. A lot of them were going for a fresh start. Someone running from the law.
Yeah.
Some wanted to challenge themselves. Some saw about the great opportunity of Texas. So they'd go down there with this attitude, with essentially promised a plot of land in some respects. Stephen F. Austin did a brilliant job of doing that. Took over from his dad, Moses Austin, who cut the deal with the Spanish but died. Stephen F. Austin comes out of Connecticut as his dad's last wish to take over and basically fulfill the deal that Moses Austin cut in the 1820s and start populating an area that the Mexicans, but then the Spanish couldn't populate. It was very dangerous. It was very arid. There was no infrastructure. And there's Comanches who were taking aim at all the settlers. The Americans were not afraid of the American Indians. In fact, in many cases, they got along with them. In Sam Houston's case, he was the first most high-profile American Indian advocate. He used to live with them. And they went down there and they just started settling. And they formed their own communities. They looked out for each other, but they had independence. And the word went that the land was cheap. It had unbelievable potential. And these people were known as self-starters. Just get out of my way. We help each other when we can, but I just want to be able to live my life. And it was more of the promise of America that was they thought was too structured. So people went down there were very tough people. They earned their reputation from the Westerns, but they also had a sense of community. And the whole reason why it changed was not because the Americans said, let me take this land because I'm there. It was because Spain gave way to Mexico independence. Mm-hmm. Santa Anna arose to power, a military guy, became president, and started putting military and martial law on all the provinces. And one of them was Texas. And they said, stay away from Texas. Those guys are fine. They cut the deal, was be a Catholic, no slaves, which they did not adhere to, sadly. And be a Catholic, no slaves, and you get free land, no taxes for 10 years. Santa Anna goes, yeah, that's not a good deal. You're not electing your people. I'm going to put my own mayors in there. All that military equipment we gave you to protect yourself against Indians, we're taking it all back. And you're going to be taxed immediately. I mean, that didn't go well for Americans, didn't go well for Texians. They started uprisings. When the Mexican army came in with slow, big, pinprick movements, they lost. He took the Alamo from the standing Mexican army. And then Santa Anna said, enough of this. I'm coming in with 3,000 to 5,000. We're going to teach these guys a lesson. And all the other provinces that wanted an uprising a lesson. Instead, after total annihilation, when everyone kind of loses this story after Alamo, I wanted to pick it up.
I've been to San Antonio, and of course, when you're in San Antonio, I was there 15 years ago. I wish I had this book in my brain before I went there, because I did the Clark Griswold at the Grand Canyon. You just, okay, now let's go down to the Riverwalk and drink margaritas and eat Mexican food. What about it? What about San Antonio? Why was that a linchpin for Santa Anna?
Proximity to the border. They thought if they could take this Alamo and kill everybody in a brutal way, that message would ripple through and would just upend this uprising before it happened. You can't beat a standing army, especially the one that's going out for total annihilation. So that's why they did it. And then they thought, okay, we'll keep moving. We'll kill everybody that we see that doesn't listen. We'll burn all their villages. We'll let them know there's a new sheriff in town. And what they did is almost like the Russians did to the Napoleon and would also do to Hitler. they did the whole slash and burn thing.
Yeah.
Sam Houston had them retreat and burn all the villages, so they weren't getting their supply lines, weren't being replenished. Santa Anna had very thick suits. It was starting to get hot in Texas. They were running out of supplies. They were being worn out. And what the Sam Houston would back up, even though it was hard in the beginning. And I chronicled that. No one would listen to him in the beginning. Gradually they would, but he would also be training them in typical tactics, fundamental tactics in warfare. Most of his army never shot a man before. Everybody in the Mexican army had shot a man. They were experienced. They had new formations. So Sam Houston knew what he was fighting against. He was able to plan and plot. And when the time was right, they came to this famous tree called the Which Way Tree, which I went in front of for a Fox Nation special. With branches went one way to the American border. The other way was down to San Jacinto. And they said, we're ready. Let's go. And they went, and they got lucky. When they went to the Battle of San Jacinto, there was a quick skirmish. Then both sides backed up. They realized we were outnumbered and outmanned. But Sam Houston said, okay, I got one battle. I got to either win it or lose it. And when they did finally engage, they did it in the afternoon. And it was brilliant because Santa Anna's people were exhausted from marching. And they thought, if you're not going to fight early, you're not going to fight at all, because they didn't have night vision glasses or anything like that. So he fought in the afternoon. He charges, leads the charge. Most of them were sleeping with their guns in a pile. So they take him out in 18 minutes, finish him off in 2 hours. They capture Napoleon the next day, dressed like a peasant trying to escape. Not Napoleon, Santa Anna. The next day, he considered himself the Napoleon of the West. And they bring him in, and Sam Houston, who got shot off his horse and got shot in the leg, was bleeding out, did not kill him. He negotiated, again, right person at the right time with everything that you learn through your life. And he basically had him sign over Texas and tell his reinforcements to get out.
I found this part. I mean, this is just page turning at this point. After the Alamo fell, you talk about the move to Goliad. You talk about the war of attrition, retreat, and what was it called? The runaway scrape, I think you called it. And you talk about 18 minutes, that essentially the entire war turned on this 18 minutes when Sam Houston defeated Santa Anna's army in San Jacinto, I think it was. It looked like Santa Anna had defeated Houston's weakened army. I mean, you talk about it, but for our viewers, how did that turn, and how did 18 minutes of shock and awe happen when they were so depleted?
Well, it would have Santa Anna's guys were exhausted, number one, because he just marched them 24 hours. Because if you're a leader, you have to care about your people. If you go back in history, that's what happened with the Germans. They didn't care about their people. They just cared about total victory. One thing about Andrew Jackson taught Sam Houston. Andrew Jackson's men wanted to kill for him because he wanted to kill for them. Mm-hmm. And he had such loyalty among the lowest and highest officer, and he demanded equality, whether you're black, white, or the term was T. And Sam Houston saw that, and he would always say that. So Sam Houston's caring for his men made them extremely loyal to him. Number two is Santa Anna didn't. So when his men marched through the night, they were too exhausted to necessarily fight. And when they got past 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., they said, we're not going to fight. They're not going to fight today. I bet you Sam Houston's never going to fight. He's been running away on the runaway scrape, afraid of us for months, trying to avoid us. So he probably is going to look to negotiate anyway. So Santa Anna might be having a tryst or something with his woman. There's a big debate on that. He's in the back. Everybody else is asleep. And they march in a three-pronged attack. And they're able to get halfway through the open field before they even know that the Americans, the Texians, are there. By the time they wake up, the cannons have been turned on. Their own cannons have been turned on them, and they penetrated over the line. In 18 minutes, it was just brutal carnage. As the Texans, most of which knew somebody at the Alamo or Goliad, 400 died at Goliad, 200 died at the Alamo, and they said, remember Goliad, remember the Alamo, as they were just taking out the Mexican army, who basically was boxed in, backed up against a body of water, or straight ahead was into the teeth of Houston's army. So he had shaped the battlefield, and Santa Anna didn't even know he's been pushed into a corner. But at least he would have had a chance to fight his way out of it had he knew when Houston's people were going to attack. And then after 2 hours of him telling guys, calm down, let's remember the battles of warfare, the Texians couldn't be controlled. They find Santa Anna the next day. He tried to escape dressing as a peasant. He was rounded up, and they didn't know who they had until they brought him back to the prison camp. And as he brought him back, his men recognized, the other prisoners recognized him. They said, Your Majesty, you're my hero, the general. And they realized who they had. They had Santa Anna. they quickly, instead of chopping him up, they kept him for months. It was Andrew Jackson, who was president at the time, that would eventually push to have Santa Anna just sent back to Mexico. We'd fight him again in the Mexican War. So Sam Houston had the intellect and experience to say, okay, we're in your camp already. Go to your tent, get your stationery. We need you to sign some paperwork, while he was bleeding out after getting shot off his horse out of his leg. So that story, when he was taken to Louisiana to heal, he met his future wife. When he was taken to Louisiana, when it got brought back, there was a lot of forces against Houston, but he was overwhelmingly elected first president of Texas, later become governor, senator, and governor again.
He was governor of 2 states, or I guess the Republic
The
of
only
Texas
one.
and Tennessee, right?
The only one in the history of the country to be governor of 2 states.
Yeah, that's incredible. Why do you think, first of all, he should have, you think he should have become president, or at least ran for president of the United States?
It's really weird. I look at all these biographers, and which is like a pseudo-biography of his. And just at the time he was going to run, he did it half-assed. And people wonder, your whole life you've been shaped by the most powerful people. You're friends with President Polk. He was a friend of his. President Buchanan was a friend of his. Andrew Jackson was a mentor of his. Had all the power in the world with Martin Van Buren. Of course, everybody knew him because he was a lawmaker in the Senate. The Texas was going to support him. He had the popularity. He was a war hero. But for some reason, he never really fully went after the presidency. But he was able to predict that a civil war was coming unless the right person was in charge. He felt as though he could have kept the country together. He was probably wrong. But he knew that's never been unwound, even by Sam. I did a forum for Ken Starr in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Next to me was the premier Sam Houston historian, and he did not know why he didn't go balls to the wall to become president. Said it was a half-assed effort, dropped out, became governor of Texas again. And when he became governor, he said, do not go in this war, the Civil War. This is my new edition. I break it down in the paperback, which I didn't do in the hardback. I brought you to the Civil War. Jackson, he's in his 60s now, and he saw the Civil War about to happen. He said that Texas has to stay out of the Confederacy. They will lose. Hundreds of thousands will die. And the legislature outvoted him. Yeah. And the legislature outvoted him. And when he said, if you guys go in, you lose me, and they go, good. So Sam Houston left the governorship rather than support the war.
Wow.
When Lincoln found out about this, he sent a telegram to him. He said, Sam, I'll send you 50,000 troops to protect you. Keep Texas out of this war. You could save the Union. He thought about it for 2 days, threw the telegrams into the fire and said, I can't turn my guns on fellow Texans. It breaks my heart, but I'm out. If I was a younger man, I'd do it, but at this age, I won't. He would die in 1865 before seeing the end of the war, but sadly, he saw his prediction come true.
This is the addendum now. That's the new part to your paperback, which has just been released this week. That's interesting. I might have to get that just to read that, because I think that's incredible. Obviously, the Civil War is a pivotal moment in American history. Going back to the Alamo and Goliad, throughout the book, you talk about Jim Bowie and William Burritt Travis and Davy Crockett, whose deaths were crushing at the Battle of the Alamo for Texas. We see heroes, Brian, so infrequently today. Maybe we could talk about SEAL Team 6 taking up bin Laden, or the special forces that fought back at Benghazi, against the terrorists. But today's war heroes, do you think they have the same cultural significance for history as we saw with Bowie, Travis, Crockett, and Houston?
No, I just think it's part of time. Everything's so black and white. Soon we're going to have robots fighting, and drones are going to do our work. But David, I would say that if I ask somebody that's engaged like you, they'll be able to roll out the generals that mattered most: Tommy Franks, Ray Odierno, David Petraeus, McChrystal, Flynn. Those are the guys that were on the ground doing this incredible work, and you could read all about their heroics on a regular basis. And I think we can appreciate who they are and the inspiration that they provided in the books that they've written. So I do think we have them when we're at war. But this war on terror against this enemy that doesn't show itself, that's willing to rise up and crash planes into buildings or put IEDs in the road and blow up Humvees, it's not like the Nazi war machine that's rolling at you, and who can stop them? Dwight Eisenhower and George Patton. So I don't think it's like that. I think it's a part of society. But I'm really heartened by this generation and how they treat military members, giving up seats in airplanes, the way they treat them on an everyday basis. Thanks for your service.
Yeah.
When you read back in the 70s and you see how we were being torn apart in the 60s, I just think that we got it right. Maybe we can't elevate people to the huge statues we see in Sam Houston and the way they were, but I do think that they are very appreciated.
Brian, last question for you. I know you got a hard out, and this is, finishing up the book here. And by the way, you raised some questions. I'd love to get your opinion on General Flynn and that whole situation right now and how that might come out. But if you can answer that, I'd love your last question, the last question about your book. And in the conclusion, we see how Houston was pressed for annexation, Texas annexation into the Union. How do you think Texas would have continued to operate as a sovereign state had it not become part of the United States?
It wouldn't have. There's no way. In fact, he did a brilliant Trump move. The UK was wooing him. They said, they were very worried about security. Mexico wanted that country, wanted the province back, did not want Texas to be independent. There was constant skirmishes at the border. That was the Mexican War that we saw once they were annexed. So I would say that England came in there and they saw a huge opportunity. And they said, listen, I'll provide the naval protection. I'll provide the military protection. The revolution was a big misunderstanding. Let us take you over. Why don't you become a colony of ours? And basically Sam Houston said, guys, you could take your time, but I'm probably going to go with England if you don't make a decision yet. And that pressed the legislature to make a move, say, my goodness, we don't want England in our backyard. And we want to get them out. We want to get them out of Oregon. We got to get them out of Washington. So let's go make this move. It was a brilliant move by Sam Houston, who wanted annexation from the days sitting on the Hermitage porch talking with Andrew Jackson. And fundamentally, I was ready for this argument too, but I didn't get it. Mexico was stolen. Texas was stolen from Mexico. These intellectual giants like Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, James Madison fully believed that Texas was included in the Louisiana Purchase. And it was just an easy out. John Quincy Adams, the Secretary of State, did a deal where he just said, hey, Spain, if we take Florida, you can have Texas. And it outraged people like Jefferson and Jackson. What are you talking about? Jackson's like, I gave you Florida already. They couldn't hold it. That was not leverage. How could you give up Texas? So they were always plotting and planning to take it back. And Houston was the one you could argue. They never had found paperwork, although they did lose a lot of papers of Jackson's, that showed it, that this was a deal that Jackson had with Houston. Go down there, take Texas, and we'll gradually put it in. So that was always a goal of theirs, to do what was right, not to do something that was wrong.
Any thoughts on General Flynn?
Yeah, I think he's a great guy, great war hero, totally set up. The fact that I just think that this is going to prove that Barack Obama was not getting rid of Flynn, was not behind getting rid of Flynn to get to Trump. I think it was because he hated Flynn. Flynn, if you read the Politico story, read his biography, he was an extreme critic of the Iranian deal. Thought it was the worst deal ever. He actually went public and said, the intel coming from CENTCOM is not the intel going to the daily brief of the president when he was DIA director. He was going to blow up the intelligence agencies and redo it in a more holistic way and streamline it. Number three, he was also in Obama's face on Afghanistan, says, how dare you put together a strategy where the pullout is part of the surge? And then he went at him and said, Al-Qaeda is not on the run, and you're treating them like a bunch of bandits when they are they are a metastasizing organization in North Africa and now in Syria. Obama denied all that, called the JV team. And then when he got out, he was all over Obama saying all these things while working for Donald Trump. That's why Barack Obama says to Donald Trump on the transition, look out for North Korea, and you better make a better choice than Michael Flynn. That's my opinion. I always thought he was a great guy. Guys that tell the truth, ruffle feathers. I don't like necessarily people telling me I'm wrong. But if you read his biography, there's nothing pro-Russian in it. He understood the Russian threat, just like as it would always be. He wasn't going to roll over. He accepted money to go to Russia on an RT awards dinner. And Bill Clinton gets $1 million to speak in Russia, and he already had $20 million. When you're a general, you make about $300,000. When you get out, you're not going to live off your pension. You're asked to speak in different places. That doesn't mean he's a Russian agent. It's it's an insult to people like you and I who look at who actually read things and try to find out what's behind things. So the justice is being done right now, and I will push back to the day I die.
Well, the narrative certainly is unraveling, and it looks like it can go all the way up to the Obama White House on this. It is in the Obama White House right now, but fascinating discussion. Brian Kilmeade, you can find Brian. He is a co-host of Fox Morning Show, Fox and Friends. You can find him daily on that, and also on the Fox News radio program, The Brian Kilmeade Show. Everybody, check out this book. It really is a page turner, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would love to see, obviously with the addendum now in the paperback. So everybody go get the paperback, because it sounds like it goes up to Frederick Douglass and Lincoln in the Civil War. That will be fascinating. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to be writing about that in your next book. Thank you so much for joining us, Brian. Where can folks find you online, and where they can find the book? Yeah, if you guys want to personalize, go to briankilmeade.com. And if you want to see more on this, I did 21 features on Fox Nation, 30-minute documentaries roughly, sometimes a little more, a little less, on different places in America that are important. It's called What Made America Great, What Makes America Great. And I'm going to be rolling out some more too. So if anyone's bored at home under quarantine, enough of Netflix, go on Fox Nation, click on What Made America Great, and you'll see this story come to life. Sounds good. Stay safe out there in New York, Brian, and thank you so much for joining us. Greatly appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for all the research. Great job, David. Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Wow, that was interesting. I really feel like, I wasn't the best student at school. I had to work really hard for my A's, and I did. And I got a lot of A's, but I wasn't one of those photographic memory kids that could just study the night before. And when I feel like I'm learning something at the same time, it's compelling and entertaining, that's even better. And I see that in his books. And, there's a lot of different ways that we learn today. And, a lot of us are more visual. This book for me was visual. I felt like I was there. And I hope that you get a chance to check out the paperback. I'm going to try and get it myself, because I want to see the addendum that Brian was just talking about there that leads up from this chapter to the Civil War. So very special thanks to Brian Kilmeade. And let us know what you thought of this interview in the comment section of whatever platform it is that you are watching this. Greatly appreciate you joining us here at Whiskey Politics as well. Again, smash, I hate the term, the subscribe button. This is what kids say today. Smash the subscribe button. All right. Smash the subscribe button. Find us on all of your social media applications, Whiskey Politics on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at David Sussman. Please, again, find us at YouTube and Ricochet, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, and the like. And we'll be back again very soon here at Whiskey Politics. Thanks for joining us, folks. Cheers.